Hello and welcome to our next video lecture. Today we're going to talk about the product life cycle. And as you can tell from the exciting slide in front of you right now, the product life cycle includes a couple of big surprises. One of those surprises is that the very name of the product life cycle is a little bit misleading. Even though it's called a product life cycle and the abbreviation is PLC, it really refers to a whole industry. And by that I mean that if any one competitor is considered within the PLC, you're really looking at that competitor's entire industry. Now hopefully this will become clear through our conversation here over the next few minutes. Another surprise about the PLC, other than the fact that it really refers to an entire industry, is that the phrase product life cycle is actually used in a couple of different situations in business. For example, if you've taken an international business course, you might have been exposed to that version of the PLC, which is not the same as the one we're talking about right now. Also, in the retail environment, there might be another meaning, but for this class, for our purposes, this is the product life cycle that we're talking about, the one right in front of you. That leads to the next surprise. This actually isn't the product life cycle that we're talking about, in that this has 4 stages. But as you'll see in just a moment, there is a 5th stage. Where is that 5th stage, you might ask? Well, even before the introduction stage, right around here, there's something called the development stage. I'll abbreviate because my handwriting is sloppy. But here in the development stage, you can see that industry sales, indicated here, and industry profits are going to be below 0. Well, profits won't exist, and sales won't exist, because in the development stage, the product or service is still being developed. It hasn't reached the marketplace yet, and there's only investment. There's only in the red as the product or service is being constructed. So at this stage, in the development stage, there's no sales revenue, of course. The product's still being developed, consumers are still being studied, and even the very feasibility of the product or service being offered is still being considered. And of course, customer needs should be understood before developing a marketing strategy. Once the product or service is brought to market, we're out of the development stage and into the introduction stage. Now remember, I told you that the PLC refers to an entire industry, but at the very beginning, at the introduction stage, you're really only going to have about one competitor. So in that case, the word product could be used as the singular. The introduction stage begins when the development of that offering is complete. It actually ends when customers widely accept the product. And you can see right here, it's when you move from the introduction stage to the growth stage that industry profits finally get above the 0 mark. During the introduction stage, what the marketer wants to do is engage in these kinds of strategies. They want to attract customers by raising awareness of the product and interest in the product. The marketer wants to find ways to induce customers to try the product and buy the product, often through sampling and price discounts. The marketer needs to engage the customer in educational activities because, again, awareness is low. Understanding of the product is low. The marketer needs to strengthen or expand their own channels and supply relationships. Remember that if we're talking about somebody selling a new product, that seller, that intermediary, is taking a risk also. So the marketer needs to not only make the customer aware of the offering, they need to make members of the channel aware and interested as well. Sometimes that can be very difficult. So what the marketer wants to do is build on the availability, build on the visibility of their offering, as well as setting pricing objectives. This is all during the introduction stage, and again, this continues until the product seems to be accepted by the mainstream customer. Well, once there is acceptance of the product or service offering, we reach the growth stage. Right over here, as indicated, growth means that not just product sales, but the industry itself is growing. So as you can see, both industry sales are growing at an accelerating rate. Industry profits are growing as well, but you can see that they start to level off here as you reach the end of the growth stage. So during the growth stage, what happens is not just product sales, but the entire industry is growing. There are sustained sales increases, a rapid increase in profitability early in the growth stage that again flattens out. And the length of the growth stage really depends on the nature of the product and the competitive reactions. That reaction will generally include more competitors, more entrants into the marketplace, because after all, look at sales. Who wouldn't want a part of that? Now, there are a couple of strategies that a marketer might embark upon during the growth stage. One is to establish a strong, defensible marketing position. The other involves achieving their financial objectives. These may conflict with each other because in order to establish a strong, defensible marketing position, you need to get extensive distribution and extensive advertising. Well, the advertising and that marketing can cost money, and that kind of money does eat into profits. This helps explain why, even though sales are continuing to climb, profits are flattening out. Simply because as the industry becomes more competitive, it costs more and more money to compete. And that's where a lot of the profits are going. This is going to lead us through the growth stage to the part where, again, profits start to flatten out and even decline. We're going into the maturity stage next. Welcome to the industry maturity stage. Now you can see a couple of differences at this stage compared to the growth stage. Industry sales were climbing at an increasing rate. They continue to climb at a decreasing rate until they flatten out. They peak and they flatten out. Industry profits are already starting to decline. Here's what's going on during the maturity stage of a product, or in this case, of course, industry life cycle. Few, if any, new firms are going to enter the market, and any firms that do are basically replacing ones that have left the market. Things have stabilized. Now, what's going on during the maturity stage, this is a key point in the line right here. The maximum profits. A goal of any member of this industry, and therefore of the industry itself, is to keep profits high as long as possible. You don't want profits to start to slide down. How do they do that? Well, we'll talk more about this in just a moment. But there are opportunities for new product features and variations, all with the intentions of keeping the maturity stage going as long as possible. And this typically is the longest stage in the product life cycle because everyone wants to keep profits high. There are 4 general goals at the maturity stage. 1, generate cash flow through increasing your sales. Hold on to your market share. There's a lot of competition at this stage, even though there aren't a lot of new names entering the marketplace. You want to take market share from your rivals. Again, that might help explain why profits are going down because more and more money is being spent on marketing. You also want to, at this stage, increase your share of customer. And that is, you want individual customers to spend more on your product and particularly less on your competitors. So how can you achieve these goals of generating cash flow, holding market share, stealing market share, and increasing your share of customer? One option is to develop a new product image, something to keep your product shiny and clean. Find and attract new users to the product, people that haven't used your product before. At the maturity stage, things are stable. Again, you don't have a lot of new entrants to the marketplace. That's why stealing market share and holding market share and increasing share of your customer are so important. Those all, you might have noticed, involve current customers. Maybe not yours, but current members of the marketplace. Another way to stay in maturity, as I mentioned a moment ago, is to find and attract new users. Also discover new applications for the product. And also applying new technology to the product. These are all things that marketers want to do at the maturity stage of the product life cycle. Most of the products you see when you're shopping in your day-to-day consumer existence are at the maturity stage. Quite simply, a couple of reasons, but really the main reason is that's where marketers want to be, at the maximum level of profitability. And now here comes the decline stage of the product life cycle. Look what's happening to industry sales. They are going down. Look what's happening to industry profits. They are flatlining. If a product happens to find itself at the decline stage, there are a couple of options. One is attempt to postpone the decline by continuing those strategies that you were using at the maturity stage, finding new customers for your product, stealing market share from your competitors. Stealing, I guess, isn't the best word to use, but, competitively gaining market share from your rivals. Another option is just to accept the inevitability of the decline stage. And a couple of things you can do at this point then. You can do what's called harvesting, and that is just sell everything. Even if you have to lower your price, sell everything. People aren't buying it too much anymore anyway. Look at how your sales have declined. That's called harvesting. Another approach is divesting, and that is perhaps sell the entire unit of your company that's represented in this industry. Sell it to another competitor that perhaps might feel that they can make more of the situation than you can. So some factors to be considered during this stage, the decline stage. The market segment potential. Maybe it's not the product that you should divest, it's the customers that you should divest, and just focus on particular product segments that are buying what you're selling. And that is have a much more focused advertising, much more focused product development. Basically, don't try to sell your fountain pens to every school child. Just sell your fountain pens to calligraphers. So another factor is the market position of the product, and that is if you're at the top, if you got the most market share, but it's of a declining industry, in that case maybe you do want to harvest, sell all you can. If you've got if your product is of low market share in a declining industry, maybe sell it to your rival that's got a higher share. After all, they may not have the same perception of the industry's decline that you have. Consider cutting your price. Again, that's part of a harvesting strategy. Consider how quickly the market is deteriorating. If it's time to move your resources away from a declining industry, then do it. Move it to something that's more profitable. So this is your product life cycle. And as we've seen, the PLC has the ability to offer marketers some guidance on strategies that they might want to use and as they manage their products through time. You need to ask yourself, where in the PLC is your client's offering? Use some of the ideas that I just shared with you in order to determine that. The PLC is not perfect. It's not a perfect model of markets, and there are a couple of criticisms about it. For example, the shape of the curve. It looks like more or less like a typical inverted U or bell curve. Some product forms don't really follow this traditional cycle. For example, clothing or fashion tend to go through the product life cycle fairly rapidly, regular up and down cycles as styles are in fashion and then out of fashion and then back in fashion again. Fad products and seasonal products might be popular for a short amount of time, see sales drop until a later interest in the toy or the offering again, maybe decades later. So for fads, the product life cycle will be very much compressed. For some things like staple goods, like say laundry detergent, the product life cycle can go on indefinitely, staying at the maturity phase for a long, long time. Consider again the example of laundry detergent, an easy example to talk about here. Until laundry detergent isn't needed anymore, it's going to stay where it is at the maturity stage. Now, laundry detergents will continue to come up with innovations and marketing ideas in order to keep people buying the product, and specifically to keep people buying a particular brand. That's who they're competing against right now. They're with each other, and the competition can be intense. Another criticism about the PLC is that the length of the stages are not equal no matter what the graphic in front of you looks like. And they're not of equal length. Again, the maturity stage is meant to last for a long time. And with technology and rapid dispersion of information, the introduction and growth stages could be even shorter because the word gets out so quickly about new products and new innovations. Another area of unpredictability in the product life cycle can occur during the early stages, the introduction and the growth stages, where one kind of logic might indicate that it's in the best interest of all the competitors to build the industry overall, the high tide raises all boats kind of thinking, and that is unless members of the entire industry have customers, nobody will succeed. But some brands might instead choose to promote their brand over the entire industry. In some industries in particular, I'm thinking of staples like the egg industry, where you really don't know brands of eggs. The entire industry really supports each other. And if one particular brand decides that they want to emphasize themselves over the rest of the industry, they might face some rejection and discontent from their competitors. Another big variable in the product life cycle that's hard to predict is really the importance of technology. And that is, there are some products that might be at the growth stage, maybe the maturity stage, today with no decline in sight, and all of a sudden technology comes over and knocks them off their feet. Again, I hate to keep using old examples, but film for cameras, cassette tapes, things like that at least in my lifetime I've seen replace something. Cassette tapes replaced albums. Then they were replaced by CDs, and CDs are being replaced by the cloud, by MP3s. These things are hard to predict, especially if you're suffering from marketing myopia and you're only really focused on your own industry. So those are just a few of the reasons why the product life cycle is a tool. It's not perfect, but we can use it, and I do want you to include this as part of your project in understanding our client and where their industry is right now. So while the PLC is not perfect, it's a marketing tool that I want you to understand. The underlying message is that markets are dynamic, they change over time, and as they change over time, the kinds of planning and strategies have to change also. If you have any questions, of course, we can talk about it some more in class. You can always reach out to me if some of this does not make sense to you. Hopefully this was a useful explanation of the product life cycle. Thanks for your attention.